We sit down with some of your favorite black creatives in Hollywood to discuss how they made it in the entertainment industry. This week, we're speaking to Daveed Diggs, most known for his role in the mega hit phenomenon Hamilton. He can also be seen in series such as Snowpiercer and The Good Lord Bird. And his critically acclaimed film Blindspotting is now a TV series at Starz. We asked Daveed to tell us something that not a lot of people may know about how he got his start in the industry.
So I'd come back to the Bay Area after college, and there's this big, they still do this. There's a big like cattle call style audition for all the theaters in the Bay Area send representatives to this one audition. It's called Theater Bay Area. And then, so you go there and you do like 2 minutes of something, and then hopefully people call you, and everybody has a big sheet with your name on it. And so it's a chance for all the theaters to see new talent or whatever. So I went there and did that and got a call from a little theater company called Custom Made Theater Company. And we did a production of Temptation by Václav Havel, which is an adaptation of the Faust story. In an office park, that theater was actually in an office in the Mission. In San Francisco, and it was like in an office building. They had just taken over one building or one office, and so like one of the rooms was like would have been the lobby, and then like you moved into the theater, which was just another office. It could only seat like maybe 60 people or something. So that, I guess that was like my entry into the thing. That play ends with a scene direction that says that the theater and our adaptation of that at the time was like some weird sort of Guantanamo-esque thing where I was like stripped naked and then put in an orange jumpsuit, and like all the other characters had become the devil, and they were like laughing at me, And my mom tells this story about going to see that show and walking down the stairs to the office. She's walking down the stairs and she hears behind her some like older women saying like, "Wish I had saddled it if I'd known he was gonna get," and my mom having to turn around and be like, "That's my son." Like everybody gets into the business, I think, naked on stage.
And I will say that I guess most people got to know you, I guess mainstream recognition with Hamilton, and I would say I guess I was a late adopter to Hamilton, because I remember you first from the first time I remember seeing you was guest starring on Law and Order SVU in one of the, episodes, which I think is also kind of like, something that many actors go through. I feel like most actors either start on a Law and Order guest spot, and they're on a soap opera. It's either one or the other before everyone gets big. But what is an early career role, be on stage, can be on screen, that you think has had the biggest impact on your career today?
Honestly, I toured this before Hamilton. I was touring this play called Word Becomes Flesh. It was written by one of my mentors, Mark Bamuti Joseph, who is now at the Kennedy Center, actually. And before that, he was running Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and he also ran Youth Speaks when I was a kid. So I like came up sort of learning and then also teaching poetry classes through his organization. He had this show that he wrote as a solo performance piece. There was a series of letters to an unborn child that he was writing while his son was being born. And 10 years after he performed that, which I saw his performance at that, I was interning at the Hip Hop Theater Festival in New York. And 10 years later, he decided to remount it, but with a divided up amongst a cast of 5 Black men. And getting to perform some of these words that had already had a profound effect on me, that were about fatherhood, this is the first time for me that Bamuti does this thing where he doesn't believe that word exists without body, the physical manifestation of speaking. And so it was the first time as an actor I ever felt particularly connected to my body. I'm like a pretty heady guy. And that is probably a thing that has ended up serving me so well throughout my career, is being able to connect what my voice and what my brain is doing to like being intentional about the way my body is moving. And I really learned that in that show from him and from the other dancer poets in that show. And so that probably for me is still the one I still see the biggest ripple effects from.
Yeah, yeah. And now I want to dive into Blind Spotting, which was, one of my favorite films of that year. I remember I first saw it back at Sundance, and it felt like it was taking forever for it to finally be released in theaters. Everyone's like, "Oh, I want to see this movie," and I'm like, "Yeah, I saw that movie months ago, and I've been waiting to see it too." Did you always know that you wanted to do something else after that film, whether it was a sequel, a series, or just some sort of revisiting of it? Did you think about that when you first conceptualized Blind Spotting, even before the film?
No, definitely not. It took us 10 years to make that film. And we were done. We were definitely not trying to make a TV show out of it. It was not our idea necessarily, but once somebody presented the idea to us, it became an unavoidable one, mostly because we thought that Ashley, the character Ashley, was sort of underserved in the film necessarily because it was so much of Colin's story, but that she had so much to say. And so it was that was really the impetus for continuing the story, and then also being able to revisit the sort of touchstones of the Bay Area that we'd like to present and push out there, and that are fun to work in, and there's so many different characters and stories there. So we were given an opportunity to play in that world and to actually, and to create a ton of jobs during a pandemic when nobody was working. So it was like, well, let's do it. Let's give it a try. And I'm very happy we did, because I love the TV show very much.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, you have been working on Blind Spotting many years before we even saw it on screen. So I guess that was a different time when you were developing it than the time when it was released. And when I'm thinking about the time it was released, it was a particular, we're going through a very different time politically, very different time socially. And then we are in a part where it was a different space when you were developing it. We were in a different space when the movie came out. And we're in a different space now that the series is out. Has your lens on spotting changed as time goes on? Do you think it evolves with time, or do you think generally it's always been about the same story at the core, or has like...
That's interesting. That's a really great question. I think so. The development phase was there's a difference between developing something 10 years ago and developing it for 10 years. So I do think like the version that was released was pretty close to a very contemporary thing. We had our last major rewrite was immediately before shooting. We only shot for 22 days and it was out the next year, really. So like it was pretty contemporary as far as movies go. But I think, when you're talking about the inherent PTSD of Blackness as it relates to the way that Black people are policed in this country, like that's not going out of style, unfortunately. I don't think, like, you know what I'm saying? Like the those things were true when we started making the film, were still true when the film was released, and are still true now, I think. But what I like about a movie is that the context in which you are viewing it is what matters. That actually is what makes the movie. The movie is fixed. We don't get to change that. And so you see this when you look at, the sort of backlash against Gone with the Wind that happened last. Like, that's fascinating to me, right? But our contemporary culture decides what is useful and valuable and taboo and about art that is fixed like that. It's different than a theater piece, which we make it new every time. So I think that people blind spotting the film in the wake of the sort of renewed eyes on Black Lives Matter, and in the wake of George Floyd, and the film speaking so directly to these things that have been happening, but that were getting a lot of national attention at the time, I think paved the way for an interesting shift when we wanted to focus our energies on this TV show. which was that, well, that exists, and we're getting to watch this one version of how that PTSD exists. But let us use that, the table stakes of that now that exists, to talk about how the prison system in this country affects people who don't go to prison. Right. And so like that was the interesting thing that we got to do, that it seemed like right now maybe the world is more interested in hearing, because we are so used to in the last year talking about police and are we defunding the police, and are we, you know, like sometimes you're just more able to hear something than you were at a different point. And it helps when like things are being spoken about a lot around you. So the world we're releasing the TV show into is one where I think as a society, we are a little more comfortable at least talking about the idea of policing. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. And you spoke about this a little bit before, but can you talk more about the decision to, you know, place the character of Ashley at the center of this? And then also, do you think that you may have thought about a different direction had Jasmine Cephas Jones not been in the role, or was she heavily influential in saying, okay, we want to center all of this around her, you know?
Yeah, I mean, she's Jasmine Cephas Jones. I mean, I do think she's she's so young. She's like, you know, one of the great actors of our time. I think she's Absolutely. So good. And I think, and we saw it in the film, and then we also saw, like, you know, the roles that she was getting after that not really being ones that are pushing her to the limits of what she's capable of. And we felt like, well, we have this character that you love to play and that we do think is a full enough woman to contain anything that you might want to do. So that was sort of how we pitched it to her. Like, are there ways that you would like to be challenged? Or the thing, you know, like, can we, if this is a container for that, would you be into the idea? And she fortunately said yes. And that's a really joyous thing for me and for Raphael to get to write for an actor like that, who can actually do anything and who is excited to do things that make them nervous, you know? And so she's so, she's just so damn good. And so, Ashley, the fact that Jasmine created Ashley with us is one of the main reasons there's a show now.
Yeah. And then also, how did you both work to shape the world around her as well? And I feel like it's so interesting because Jalen Barron gives one of the most, I love her performance in the show so much. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, I need her in everything else after I see this performance. You have her in there. Right. You have Helen Hunt, who is like giving such great comedy in that series. You know, what did it work like? What was the process like pulling all of these people's world, and especially, and also like including Miles in that as well, but like also having him kind of like in the background, but kind of also actions and her thoughts in the series as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was about, we're going to make Ashley the center. So we got a clear space for that, which is really like get Miles and Colin out of the way. But I think, the story that we wanted to tell was one about this relationship that is fighting to survive, even when the prison system is actively trying to pull them apart and actively sort of wrecking the community that they have and the trajectory that they had started to be on. And so as we started populating the world, it was just about like who are the people who are going to be around Ashley, who are going to be foils for her or be supporters for her or give new insight for her or like, show us different sides of who she is. Process, that's how we figured out who these characters would be. A Trish as an antagonist who's like a kid who used to have, now like can't stand her, in the way that like sisters can be rivals like that. These are the kinds of people that we put around her, but then they add so much to them, and you start to realize that they are also like fully formed humans. And what I love is that like they're such talented actors, and they all work so hard that like they can hold the totality of their story in small moments. Kind of a lot of characters in the show for a 30-minute sitcom, basically, you know? And so like, sometimes like we don't get in a particular episode, you can't divide up the screen time evenly. Like it really has to be focused through Ashley, but all of these other actors are grounded enough and confident enough and good enough performers to, even if you only see them for 2 minutes, like you can still get all that you need to get about where they're coming from and where they're going in the episode. And then as we manage to set up the world, you can sort of swing and focus more and more on them. So the later episodes are a little more evenly divided, which is cool. But the company is amazing, you know. Candace Nicholas Littman and Benjamin Earl Turner, like all of these cats are, and Helen, obviously. And yeah, I agree with you. Jalen is just like, you just always want to see more of her. Like they're so good and they're so committed and they're working really, really hard, you know. And we use them a lot, you know. They're all have a ton of responsibility for helping to develop those characters. We ask them questions and we change scripts on the fly all the time. And we like, you know, we have a very adaptable writer's room also. And so like we, you know, trying to just get it right and make sure everybody has opportunities to shine and have fun and also tell like a really compelling story. And I think we really got the right people to do that.
This week's Black Entertainment Trivia Fact. Though her most known Disney Channel role is her starring role as Rocky Blue on Shake It Up, Zendaya actually guest starred on a lot of other Disney Channel shows. But which one did she not appear on? Good Luck Charlie, Ant Farm, or Austin and Ally? Find out the answer next week on ShotOnAct.com. Congrats on your recent Emmy nomination for Hamilton. Were you expecting Hamilton? You know, it was this big, you know, once in a lifetime major phenomenon that has been going on for the past few years. But, you know, the way the pandemic turned, and then we saw this film way earlier than we expected it to. And then it also becomes another phenomenon in itself. After this Disney Plus release, again, like people who weren't able to see it before were now able to see it in their homes during a particularly trying time history of everything, I guess. So what was that like, you know, kind of seeing this, you know, second wave of Hamilton success and getting accolades from it, going from, you know, the Tonys to the Emmys now?
Yeah. I mean, the accolades are weird. If I like, honestly, because like it's weird to be like doing that. Like I haven't performed that show in over 5 years, so like I don't, you know, like I don't. And that performance was shot so long ago. Like I don't think about Hamilton in my day-to-day life, but it came up in the zeitgeist again. And so like the accolades for it are strange, but I do think it was a pretty cool thing for. You know, for the creators, for Lynn and Tommy and all those cats to do, along with the whole Disney Corporation, to be like, we could put it out now. People kind of need something. Like, why don't we just put it out now? You know, and to still put the muscle behind it. I mean, who knows how much muscle Hamilton needs, but it still needs something. Like you can't just release the thing. You know. Something being good does not mean that it gets watched, and so you have to put a ton of energy behind, particularly in the television space. There's so much, so you have to cut over the noise some way, and so they had to put a ton of muscle behind it too to get people to watch it with like, without a doubt, like returns that are diminished from what they would be had it had a theatrical release, right? Had they just decided to sit on it for longer until theaters potentially come back, you know. So I think it was a cool thing that they did, and it made a lot of, like you said, like brought a lot of joy to people at a time when folks needed it. And again, that context thing, it was really interesting watching people watch that towards the end of the Trump administration, whereas we created it towards the end of the Obama administration, right? And so the discussions surrounding it were different, and I found that really fascinating. And so It was cool to get to witness that, you know, in my lifetime with a piece of theater. Also, is it the
Yeah.
whole Hamilton experience is like, this is not how plays are supposed to go. You know, like, there are these
Yeah.
small things that happen in one place, and if you saw it, you saw it. The whole experience of it becoming kind of a global phenomenon is so outside of what usually happens with that kind of thing. So I'm feel very lucky to be a part of it. It's fascinating to get to watch the world continue to discover it.
Yeah, yeah. And though your Emmy nom was for Hamilton, you know, there was another one worthy too, because you gave a show-stopping performance as Frederick Douglass in The Good Lord Bird, and I keep telling people to, you know, check it out, because I feel like more people need to be, you know, tuning in and talking about it. But how did playing him you know, have an impact on you? And then also, it's such a different historical tale that we've seen before. I liken it a lot to kind of ground had when it first came out. So how did that mean? What did that mean to you? And then also, what do you think this could mean for the future of like it was such done in such a fresh way?
Yeah, I mean, I love the novel that it's based on. So Ethan Hawke, like I was doing a play at the Public, a Susan Laurie Parks play called White Noise. It's an amazing play that doesn't get talked about enough. But Ethan came and saw that, and then we went and got coffee the next day, and he gave me the book and was like, I think it'd be cool if you played Frederick Douglass in this, but you got to read the book first, because it's a particular take on Frederick Douglass. So I want to make sure that you're like, not everyone would be cool with it. And I loved that book so much. I mean, I could not put it down. James McBride is like he's just so good. And it is an incredible way to tell a painful part of history, right? To tell the story from the perspective of a young boy going through puberty, basically. And just like, you know, he's dressing as a girl so that he doesn't have to work very hard. You know, he found that white people can't seem to tell the difference. So like, you know, he gets out of a lot of work if he wears a dress. But then he gets swept up in John Brown's revolution, and getting to tell this story about John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, which we don't teach in our schools, and that's intentional. You know what I'm saying? Because a small group of people led by a white guy who knew that slavery was wrong and was convinced that God also knew that slavery, to help figure out how to end that institution, right? Brought the country to its knees, took over the most powerful armory, even for just a few days in the nation. They don't teach it to us, you know. Getting to tell that story through the eyes of this young kid who doesn't have any awareness of the history of it, who just knows that, and, you know, who says things like, well, you know, when I was a slave, I wasn't ever hungry. Like, you know, because he's out there in the woods with John Brown's army, like struggling for, it's just like everything is very matter of fact, and there's not this concept of history. And so that's why you get to see a Frederick Douglass who gets to be ridiculous to him, because he's never seen wealth before. And to see this wealthy black man who is concerned with like the manners and the wife and the mistress that he has going on, all of these things, while also being the greatest orator of his time, like allows for a much more full portrait of this person who we tend to put on a pedestal, which I think is like not a very useful way to talk about your heroes. It doesn't allow us to achieve that same status. So when I was given the opportunity to play a Frederick Douglass who was also ridiculous, I jumped at it, because it was the first time I ever really understood him as a character that I could play. I could never have played the way he has ever been described to me, but then getting the opportunity, going and reading so much of his writing, and realizing the way that he was changing and adapting his own story for the various different causes, and how aware he was of his celebrity. And he was, you know, he was a rock star, and he enjoyed a sort of meteoric rise to fame that came with a lot of difficult things. And that is actually something I understand. It's something I like lightweight am living through. And so I was like, oh, I can play that, you know? And so it was a really, and then getting to work with Ethan, obviously, and our director for that episode, Darnell Martin, is also so great. And so, yeah, I learned so much on that project. It's my, it's my favorite thing I've done on camera, I think. And I'm just like honored to be a part of it. So yeah, that was also this year. That was crazy.
I remember, I heard about the book for so long, and then I knew that the series was coming, but I hadn't read it yet. And then when I saw that first trailer, what is this? I was like, let me read the book first, and then I was so glad I made that decision, because I feel like it kind of enhanced the experience of watching it. It's just really, really, really something.
Yeah, I mean, that book it's unbelievable what McBride pulls off in that book. Yeah. You're laughing the whole time. Like, I don't know. I found myself cackling, like sitting on the street corner reading it. Like, it's so funny. Yeah. It's because he loves everybody. He loves all of his characters. There's no villains in that story. He loves everybody.
And that's a unique thing about it. It's just the lens that it comes from that's so different than what we've seen about any narrative like this on screen before. Talked a little bit about coming up with going into production and doing things with Blind Spotting, the series during the pandemic. As a creative, that you've learned about yourself and your craft and the creative process after going through this year that we've went through and the pandemic being all of that. How have you come out of all of this?
That is also a great question. I think for me, shooting the series, there was, because I was a producer, and on that end of things, I was so concerned for everybody's safety. It was more than like the fear of getting shut down. That actually, like, there were separate COVID budgets to deal with that. It was that this hyper awareness that we had 260 or something employees, saying, like, that somebody would come to our set and get sick and potentially go home and get their family sick was like so terrifying to me. So we beefed up our restrictions like crazy. We were way over testing and all of these things. We really, we were doing everything in our power to make sure that didn't happen, because I don't think you can really make art from a place of fear, and it was already such a scary time. So it was just what can we do to make this be the safest place that you come during the day, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and any time there were cracks in that, we had to sort of address them and be like, look, safety above everything else. And if you don't feel safe, get out, like walk away, like tell us and let's make it safe before we do the thing. But the sort of rigorous pursuit of that also, and how much people had to sacrifice. So now I'm up here in Vancouver still shooting Snowpiercer, our third season. Then I've been here since February, and the borders have been closed. Aren't there anybody, you are, as an artist working on these things, also sacrificing a lot. And away from all this time is like, I really want to be working on things that are striving to be excellent. That doesn't mean they're necessarily striving to be big, important, to do something good, because going and working on something where the goal is mediocre is like, you might miss the mark trying to make something good. You do all the time, it's hard to do so much, particularly in terms of your time and who you can be around, and particularly in this last year, that like, I think I'm interested in projects that are trying to be great. Whether or not they're going to reach that mark, and I think I was more interested before in doing more things that weren't like that. Like, I just like acting. I like being in things. I'm not saying I don't want to do stuff that's fun, but I want to be trying to make the most fun thing. I don't want to be trying to make just a fun thing. If we're going to do something fun, I want to have more fun on that project than I have ever had before. But let's be explicit about the goals of this project, and then let's like do everything in our power to achieve them, because like we're giving up so much.
Daveed Diggs talked to us about everything from playing Frederick Douglass to his success in Hamilton, his recent Emmy nom, and how he got started early in his career. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Opening Act featuring Daveed Diggs. Also, don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you download your podcast. You can watch this interview in full, as well as catch exclusive content on LunchTable.com. All you have to do is create an account and log in, and you'll catch Shadow and Act exclusive content, such as Reel It Back and Shadow and Act Live. Until next time.